When people ask me about my childhood, I usually change the subject. Not because it was terrible, I always had food on the table and a roof over my head. But let's just say it wasn't exactly what was in the style. My name is Beatty, and at the age of 32, I'm finally ready to tell my story. Not because I want sympathy, but because maybe someone needs to hear it. I was 8 years old when my life completely changed. That's when my sister Sarah was born, 2 months ahead of schedule. I still remember how my father rushed to the hospital in the middle of the night, and my Aunt Andrena stayed with me. Everyone was so worried about the baby, and to be honest, so was I. I didn't know much about premature babies then, but I could tell from the faces of the adults that something was wrong. Sarah survived, but she was incredibly fragile. Our house has turned into something between a hospital and a fortress against germs. Mom was constantly cleaning, and the smell of disinfectant became as familiar as the smell of cooking dinner. Every surface has been thoroughly wiped, and God forbid if I even sniffle. "BT, was that a cough?" Mom asked, her eyes narrowing with worry. "Not about me. About Sarah. We can't take any chances. Pack your things, you're going to Grandma's for a few days." And I was leaving. Either to Grandma or to Aunt Andrena. It's like I've been quarantined. This happened so often that I started keeping a pre-packed bag in the closet. At first, I tried to treat these visits as vacations, but over time they became more and more like exile. I threw myself into my studies, deciding that at least this way I could make them proud. The round fives, the debate team, the victory at the regional science fair, but all this lost its significance before Sarah's next visit to the doctor. "Look, Mom, I won the first place at the science fair," I said, holding a shining goblet in my hands. "That's wonderful, honey. Did you wash your hands today?" Sarah was sniffing a little. The worst part started when Sarah turned 7. She suddenly stopped hurting. It was as if someone had flipped a switch and she had become a perfectly healthy child. But Mom and Dad, used to seeing her as a fragile creature, couldn't stop. They had protected her for so long that they did not know how to live otherwise. And Sarah quickly realized that she could get anything she wanted by playing the fragility card. High school was supposed to be my time to finally shine. I did everything right, excellent grades, extracurricular activities, and a reputation as a responsible and capable student. But in our house, Sarah's drama always remained the center of attention. I remember one parent-teacher meeting especially well. My chemistry teacher just finished telling Mom and Dad about my potential for a science scholarship. "BT is one of our brightest students," Mr. Machiavelli said, his eyes shining with sincere pride. "She has a real future." But he didn't finish his sentence. Mom's phone rang. "What's wrong, honey?" Mom asked, already starting to pack her things. I could hear Sarah's theatrical sobs through the speaker. I can't find my favorite pen for homework. The one BD gave me." Stupidly. Just like that parent-teacher meeting. They hurried home to comfort Sarah. Because of the pen. I stood in the empty hallway and watched them leave. "You're doing a great job, BT," Mr. Machiavelli awkwardly patted me on the shoulder. But those words didn't change anything. After that, I noticed that they stopped going to my events altogether. It was easier that way, they said. No risk to Sarah. No tantrums interrupting everything. When I won the state debating championship, they didn't even offer to put the cup on the mantelpiece. "Sarah gets nervous when she sees other people's achievements," Mom explained calmly, putting the award away in a drawer, as if it were not about months of hard work, but about an unnecessary souvenir. I'm used to the fact that my successes pale in front of Sarah's needs. That my place in the family is to be a quiet, comfortable backdrop for her endless little dramas. But college admission day was supposed to be special. Grandiose. I received a full state scholarship, merit grants, the whole package. Everything I've dreamed of, everything I've worked for years. I was over the moon with happiness. Until she returned home. "Now you can finally move out," Sarah announced indifferently at dinner, picking at her plate with a fork. "And I can turn your room into my gaming paradise. I think 3 monitors, maybe a streaming setup." She didn't even pretend to be happy for me. I started counting down the days until the freshman orientation. I knew that once I crossed the threshold of the dorm, I wouldn't look back. The college years flew by unnoticed. I spent every free minute in the library, labs, and lectures. The house became a place I visited only occasionally, mostly for the obligatory family dinners, where Sarah talked loudly and enthusiastically about her latest drama in high school. At 23, armed with a diploma, I got a job as a manager. My salary was barely enough to rent a tiny apartment and sushi from a grocery store, but I had my own space. And it felt like winning the lottery. And then one day, during my lunch break, I saw an advertisement for an online investing course. Learn how to make money work for you. I usually skipped such things, but something made me stop. The course wasn't cheap, but it would have been enough for me. If I ate instant noodles for a month. I've made up my mind. The instructor, Dave, explained in such a way that even complex investment strategies seemed obvious. I started small, investing a few hundred in promising technology stocks. Then a few hundred more. I studied the market as if my life depended on it. At first, there were small victories. Then, a real breakthrough. The first major success came with an artificial intelligence company. No one noticed how my invested $500 turned into $5,000 in 3 months. Then a biotech startup tripled my money. Over time, my part-time job started to bring in more than my main job. I'll never forget that morning when I realized I could leave. I was sitting at my office desk, mindlessly flipping through quarterly reports, when my investment app beeped. Another promotion has reached the target price. I've done the calculations. My investment income has tripled. I opened an empty document and typed in my resignation letter. I kept going to those Saturday family dinners. Don't ask me why. Maybe because of habit. Maybe because of some stubborn hope that everything will change. I sat at the table, picking at my mother's overcooked chicken, listening to the conversation return to Sarah over and over again, while my investment portfolio in my phone pocket slowly but surely continued to grow. "BT, you're still in Conti, right?" Mom would ask sometimes, not really interested in the answer. "Yes, the same job," I replied calmly. I watched as their attention dissipated before I even had time to finish. It was easier that way. I didn't have to explain that I left Conti 2 years ago. That now I earn more in a day than I used to in a month. Sarah was the star of every family dinner. She went to university. My mother proudly announced. One of those prestigious universities where tuition costs more than a house. At least BT has her own place now. At least some stability. I pretended I hadn't heard. There was a murmur of approval from the table. Everyone was discussing what prospects awaited Sarah, which companies were ready to fight for the honor of having her in their ranks. "Oh, she's just a star." Aunt Andrena threw up her hands. "Imagine, she will probably be hired by one of the top firms." I continued to cut the chicken, mechanically moving my fork around my plate, trying not to look at Sarah, who, enjoying the attention, was smiling like a cat that had just licked cream. "What about you, BT?" Uncle Robert asked suddenly. "What are you doing now?" Mom immediately roused up. "BT has moved into a new apartment," she said, as if this was my greatest achievement in recent years. "Filming?" Aunt clarified. Yes, but that's not the point." Mom hurriedly interrupted. Sarah is the same. I felt something constrict inside. I was 29. I could buy not only my apartment, but also their house, if I wanted to. I could buy everything they dreamed of. But they didn't even ask how exactly I was able to afford the move. It was obvious to them that I was just working somewhere. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't trying to prove anything to them. I just accepted it. After a family dinner, I decided to walk to my apartment. I wanted to get some air. The street was warm, noisy, and full of life. I walked past restaurants where people were laughing and raising glasses, past storefronts sparkling with lights. I stopped at the coffee shop on the corner and bought a latte. The barista smiled at me, wishing me a good evening, and I found myself thinking that there was more sincerity in his words than in most conversations with my family. Silence awaited me at home. I took off my shoes, ran my hand over the smooth surface of the kitchen counter, and inhaled the scent of fresh wood. It was my space. Mine and mine alone. I sat on the couch, stretched out my legs, and opened my laptop to check the market. Stocks were rising. The portfolio was thriving. I updated the financial report, checked the new investment proposals, and smiled. A year later, I was going to buy another apartment, this time not for myself, but for renting. I'd been building my life, step by step, investment by investment. And I didn't need anyone's approval anymore. I looked at her and tried to remember if she had ever worked outside of the summer jobs or internships that her parents found through connections. Had she ever had to deny herself anything, except perhaps choosing between a designer bag and a new pair of shoes? Some of us have standards, I repeated, turning her words over in my head as if tasting them. Standards. An interesting word for a man who lived off his parents and my transfers. Then maybe you should review them, I said calmly, sitting down in an armchair. She rolled her eyes, returning to her phone screen. You don't understand how important it is to live in the right place, among the right people. Apartments in the right areas are an investment in the future. I almost laughed. An investment in the future? I repeated. In that case, maybe you will pay for this investment yourself? Sarah pretended she hadn't heard. The next few months passed quickly. I was working on new investments, expanding my portfolio, and considering entering the international market. Every day brought new deals, new opportunities, new amounts in my accounts. I attended family dinners less and less often. I've known for a long time how they go. Her parents talked about Sarah, her new job, and her prospects. No one asked me how I was doing. But one day my mom called me in the middle of the week, which was extremely rare. "BT, honey, how are you?" I realized right away that it wasn't just a call out of politeness. "It's okay, Mom." "Something happened?" "Well," she paused. "You know, Sarah is still looking for a place to live. The prices are so high, it's so hard to find something suitable." I remained silent, letting her voice her request. "And, you know how hard she worked. She has such a promising career, but without a good place to live. She needs a start." We thought maybe. "Maybe what?" I asked, even though I knew the answer. "Maybe you could help?" I closed my eyes, feeling something constrict inside. "What do you mean, Mom?" Well, she spoke more softly now, as if she was embarrassed. "Maybe you could buy an apartment for her? Not necessarily something big, just a cozy place in a nice neighborhood." I took a slow breath, giving myself a few seconds to process what I'd just heard. "Do you want me to buy Sarah an apartment?" "It's not just that, BT," Mom hastened to add. "This is an investment in her future. Imagine how much easier it will be for her if she doesn't have to worry about housing at the beginning of her career." I remembered my first apartment, a tiny, rented one that I could only afford by giving up any extra expenses. I remembered how I counted every dollar, how I lived on noodles while I was learning how to invest. Sarah didn't even try to find a place to live within her means. She immediately chose the right area without even thinking about compromises. "Mom," I said in a flat voice, "I'm not going to buy an apartment for her." There was silence on the other end of the line. "But, BT," she began. "No, Mom. Sarah's going to be so upset. Sarah always gets upset if she doesn't get what she wants." "You don't understand," she sighed. "We just want to help her settle into life." I didn't answer. "We thought you'd help the family, since you're doing so well." I closed my eyes, feeling a wave of fatigue wash over me. "I'm already helping. I'm paying for your mortgage, taxes, and loans for her education." "But this is different," Mom insisted. "No, Mom. It's not different." I heard her sigh heavily. "Well, whatever you want, dear." There was no gratitude in her voice for everything I had already done. "I'm just disappointed that I won't do more." When I hung up, I felt like I had just crossed an invisible line. "I won't let them use me anymore." I stood up slowly, feeling an icy calm spread through my body. Sarah was still holding my laptop, but now not triumphantly, but as if it were a snake ready to bite her at any moment. Her voice was trembling, and her face was pale. "It's some kind of mistake, isn't it?" All eyes were on me. "BT, honey, what is this?" Mom asked cautiously, still not fully understanding what was going on. I looked at her, at my father, who froze with his glass raised, at Uncle Robert, who for the first time in a long time did not look condescending. "This is my bill," I said calmly, holding out my hand. "Give me back my laptop, Sarah." She didn't move. $4 million? What is it?" she managed. I sighed. "Yes, and?" "And?" Her voice trembled. "And? Why the hell do you have $4 million?" I didn't answer. This is a joke, right? You can't." She trailed off, clearly trying to process something, but her brain just refused to accept reality. "It's very simple, Sarah," I finally said. "I was working." Mom gasped. "But you just work in an office," she muttered. I chuckled. "I left there 3 years ago." There was a pause. Aunt Andrena began, clearly trying to put the puzzle together in her head. "If you're not in the office, where did you get the money?" "Investments," I shrugged. Sarah finally came to her senses and slammed the laptop shut, putting it on the table. "This is nonsense," she hissed. "You're just lying." I looked at her, met her gaze, angry, confused, in which something more than anger burned. Fear. She always considered herself superior to me. Always. I was just a background for her, something insignificant, someone to despise, ignore, ridicule. And now I'm the one who's been paying for her comfort all my life. "Sarah." Mom began, but she jumped up. "All this time?" "Stop it," she screamed. "All this time, you've just been sitting on millions and watching how we're bursting into debt, how we're taking out loans for my studies, how—" I crossed my arms over my chest. "I paid for your studies, Sarah." The room seemed to explode from the silence. Sarah was looking at me, and I could see from her face how her worldview was collapsing. "What? Do you really think that Mom and Dad could afford a private university without my help? Do you think that this party in your honor, this house you lived in, the food you ate, where did it all come from?" She took a step back, as if I'd hit her. "No," I said. "Yes," I paused. "I've been transferring money to them since I received my first six-figure sum." But why?" Her voice was trembling. I chuckled. "Because I'm stupid." Because despite everything that's happened, they're still my parents. I turned to my mom, who still looked like she'd just been hit. And Mom, I thought maybe it would make a difference. That maybe for once you'll look at me the same way you look at her. I nodded towards Sarah. But I was wrong. Mom opened her mouth, but there were no words. You're my sister, Sarah managed. I looked at her. Yes, Sarah, I'm your sister. And that's why it's all ending today. What? No more transfers. Her face paled. You can't. I can, I interrupted. And I do. I took out my phone, opened the banking app, and stopped automatic transfers right in front of everyone. Sarah took a step toward me, her lips trembling. BT, you can't just leave us. I looked at her. I'm not quitting. I'm just not financing your life anymore. She shook her head, her eyes sparkling. You did this on purpose. I chuckled. No, Sarah. You did it on purpose. You wanted to humiliate me in front of the whole family, but in the end you humiliated yourself. I grabbed my laptop and turned to the door. Mom's voice was quiet, almost pleading. I stopped. Please. I exhaled, turned around, and looked into her eyes. I'm not a part of this show anymore, Mom. And she went out, leaving them in silence, in which the truth finally sounded. I looked at them and felt only fatigue. Years of waiting to be noticed, to be anything but a convenient sponsor of their lifestyle, were disappearing into thin air, leaving a void in their wake. A debt? I repeated slowly, as if trying the word out. Am I a bank? We are your parents. Mom screamed, her face flushed red with anger. We raised you, you have to support us. No, Mom, I don't owe you anything, I replied coldly. Mom gasped as if I had just hit her. You're talking as if we're strangers to you. I looked at her, then at my father, who was sitting with a sullen expression on his face, arms crossed over his chest. When I was successful, you didn't even notice. When I asked for your attention, you weren't interested in how I live. It's always been about Sarah. It's not fair. Sarah screamed. You're just jealous. I laughed. Jealous? For what? That you've been waiting all your life for everything to fall into your hands? The fact that you can't even afford to rent an apartment? Or that you were so sure of your superiority that you didn't even bother to find out who I had become? Sarah blushed, her lips trembling with rage. That's not fair. What is it? I took a step toward her, forcing her to step back. That I'm not your free ticket office anymore? How dare you? She exploded. You weren't anyone. I'm going to succeed anyway, even without your dirty money. I chuckled. Great. Prove it. What? Prove it. Handle it yourself. She opened her mouth, but there were no words. I turned to my parents, who were sitting in silence, shocked. It's time for you to learn how to handle yourself, too. Are you abandoning your family? Mom's voice became strangled. I tilted my head. No, Mom. You abandoned me a long time ago. I grabbed my coat and laptop and headed for the door without turning around. A sob sounded from behind. BT. I froze. For a moment, the same girl who so desperately wanted their approval woke up in me. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I walked out the door, leaving the past behind. I looked at the list of real estate offers, flipping through photos of spacious apartments with panoramic windows, cozy houses in green suburbs, modern penthouses with ocean views. The world was huge, and there were so many places where no one knew me. No one knew me. I could have disappeared. The thought was both frightening and intoxicating. All my life, I've been someone to someone. Convenient, reliable, and unobtrusive. An endless source of help, support, and financial safety net. But no one in my family knew what I really was. What I was like when I wasn't trying to earn their recognition. And now I had the opportunity to find out for myself. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, staring out the window. The city was twinkling with lights, living its own life. Somewhere out there, people were rushing home, hugging loved ones, arguing, laughing. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had no obligations to anyone but myself. The phone on the table blinked. A new number. I didn't read the message, I just blocked the sender. Then the doorbell rang. I already knew who it was without even looking through the peephole. They couldn't just back down, couldn't accept my refusal. For them, I was a convenient circuit that worked flawlessly. In their worldview, I couldn't just switch off. James knew what to do. I could hear his calm voice when he was talking to them in the lobby. I could hear Sarah's protests, pleas, and irritated tone, and I could hear Dad saying something about betrayal, about not doing that to a family. And I remembered countless times when they did the same to me. Mom, who repeatedly put my achievements below Sarah's whims. The father who called me mediocre. Sarah, who lived as if everyone around her owed her something. I closed my eyes. I could finally tell them that I didn't owe them anything anymore. When the screams outside the door had died down, I opened my laptop again. My new life was waiting for me. Write a comment on what you think about this story and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. See you soon.